Hello, how's everyone doing today? I'm here with a special guest, Avram Maitner. I hope that I pronounced it right. He's an anarchist, and he asked if he could come on my show to debate, I guess, the non-aggression principle and why he thinks it is not a moral absolute and why it's not inviolable. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. So you want to go?
Let's hear your argument. Sorry, what?
You want me to lay out my stall now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as was we talked about earlier, having seen a few of the debates on anarchism versus minarchism, usually, often with objectivists and disciples of Ayn Rand and so on. One of the crucial sort of points of friction between minarchism and anarchism seems to be when you have anarchists who treat non-aggression as some sort of inviolable, absolute moral principle, and on the other side we have minarchists who believe that it's not an absolute inviolable right, and that it can be violated when the need arises. So I tend to see anarchists, and I was getting into trouble trying to defend the position, and because the minarchists have a set of scenarios that they'll typically throw at anarchists, and the typical one is the cabin in the woods. So you're lost in the woods, you're starving, you're close to hypothermia, you need water and so on, and you stumble across a cabin in the woods, and the question is, well, do you break into the cabin to take food, water, and shelter? So it's very difficult to say that no, you wouldn't, that you would simply expire on the porch of the cabin.
You don't have to say that.
Sorry, go on.
The question isn't what are you going to do. You have free will. You could do whatever you choose to do. The question is, should you be punished for doing certain things? So if you're going to say it's okay if you're starving to take food, if you're in the cabin in the woods scenario, if you believe that the non-aggression principle is not absolute, you would say you should be able to take someone's food, even if they say no, and you don't have to pay them back. You get no punishment, owe no reparations. I would say you have to wait. And if you believe you're starving and that you're going to die if you don't eat the food, I would say eat the food and then take the punishment, which is not going to be the death penalty. The punishment will be less severe than starving. So you have to weigh. Do I starve or do I take the punishment that comes with stealing food? So I don't think that these scenarios are a criticism against the non-aggression principle. Because the question isn't, what are you going to do? Yes, you may very well break the non-aggression principle. The question is, should you be punished for breaking it or not?
Yeah, so in the event that you decide to break into the cabin, I would agree that it is still a rights violation on that count. So if the cabin, the owner's not there, you break in, you're committing property rights violation, which is of course a violation of non-aggression. So yeah, so the question becomes, well, are you doing something that is morally impermissible there, or are you doing something which is morally permissible and then you expect to be punished for it? So you could say, well, I would pay back the owner and so on, and then, well, it's still a rights violation. But what happens if you know you can't pay back the owner? What happens if you know that you don't have the capability to make reparations?
Well, how come you don't? You can work for the guy. How much food are you going to possibly need to survive?
Sure. But what happens if you make the decision that actually I'm going to take the food, but I've no intention of paying back the guy? Would it be morally permissible then, or would it be impermissible?
I would say then, I mean, look, you can do whatever you want, free will, but I would say that there's nothing wrong with the guy finding you, saying you stole my food. I know you're in a bad situation, but I can't afford just to replenish food. I don't have a lot of money on me. I'm not going to charge you a penalty from stealing my food. I'll simply charge you what I paid for acquire the food. Pay me back, and if you say no, you bring the guy to court, and the court forces him to do so.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a pretty good starting point. So I think that, I mean, Because if you take non-aggression as an absolute and inviolable right, then in order to be ethically consistent, you'd have to say that no matter the circumstance, I would not violate that person's property rights. So that's if you're taking an absolute.
No, no, you can violate people's rights if you so feel that it is in your interest. There are just consequences that result from that, such as being thrown in jail, such as having to pay the guy back. You can do whatever you want. I can decide I'm going to rape someone if I so choose. Free will. But that doesn't mean that I don't get punished for committing rape. I can't make you do certain things. I can only say, if you violate the non-aggression principle, here's what the consequences are going to be.
Okay, but the problem with that argument is that you're getting dangerously close to a utilitarian argument there.
Yeah.
You've heard the argument, the scenario where you have the patients in the hospital who need the organ transplants.
Yeah.
So you've got for people who aren't familiar with it, you've got 5 patients in a hospital, all of whom are terminally ill. You've got, I don't know, 2 of them need a kidney, 1 of them needs a liver, the other 2 need a lung or something like that. And the doctor in the hospital, he knows these patients are going to die, and he knows this guy who doesn't have any friends, lives alone, and just miraculously happens to be a tissue match with the 5 sick patients. So if he has free will, would he in that circumstance think, well, okay, I can kill this guy and get away with it. Do I kill this guy and harvest his organs to save the other 5 people? It would clearly be a rights violation, but it's free will. He can do it. So does he kill the healthy patient to harvest his organs to save the lives of the other 5?
Well, I don't know. It depends on the doctor. But I would say that if he does do that, then he is charged with murder, and he gets the penalty that comes with committing murder.
But that's a separate question, isn't it? Is it morally permissible for the doctor to do that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty common sense attitude. If you ask most people in that scenario, should the doctor kill the healthy patient to the healthy guy to save the lives of the other 5, most people will agree with you on a common sense.
I don't think so. Most people would say yes. Most people believe, 5 is greater than 1.
I don't know. That's not my experience. I think if you ask most people who go to a hospital, do you think that we should be killing the healthy patients to save the lives of people on the transplant list? I think most people would say.
Well, if you phrase it that way, but if you say, I'm going to kill 1 innocent to save 10 people, then they might change their tune. I wouldn't, because to me, a life is a life, and 1 person is no less valuable than 10 other people. But I don't think most people have that philosophy.
Yeah. Possibly, I guess, but then you also know the trolley car example where you have the trolley coming down a track. It's going onto a section of track where you've got 5 people tied to the track. There's a switch which allows you to switch the track onto another section of track which has just 1 person tied to the track. Is it morally permissible to switch the points to send the train onto the section of track with just 1 person on it?
Mm-hmm.
So would you switch?
Well, I think you know my answer as an anarchist. Obviously, I would not.
You'd not switch. Okay, that's interesting, because most people, when asked that question, would switch. It's interesting when you see because most people that I've asked about the hospital example, when you say should the doctor kill the healthy patient, most people say no, he shouldn't. But when you ask the trolley car example, should you switch the train, most people would say yes, he would. And I guess the difference between the 2 scenarios, I guess, is in the hospital example, you have 5 people whose rights aren't being violated, who are going to die because they're sick. And I guess in the trolley car example, you have 5 people whose rights are being violated, who are going to die if the train runs over them. And then you have a 6th person whose rights are also being violated. But in that instance, it's still a rights violation, isn't it? But I think I'd be on the other side on that on the trolley car example. I think I would switch the track. I think.
I mean, look, you can play these games all day and construct some scenario which is never going to happen in the real world to try to justify why you can violate people's rights. And that's all these games are. There's never been a situation of a trolley car. No one has ever said, why don't you just yell at them and say, move out of the way? These are never scenarios that are likely to occur. These are just scenarios to justify why it's okay to violate people's rights.
It's interesting because the trolley car example has actually happened in the US. There's a train that went out of control. I've forgotten the details of it now. But there's a train that went out of control and it was going to go into a section of track where it was going to derail. And I think it was going to go into Los Angeles or something. But they could switch the track and send it into a small town where it was almost guaranteed to come off the track, but there are far fewer people, and they made the decision to switch the track, and it did come off the track and hit somebody's house. I don't think it actually hurt anybody, but it was
yeah, I don't know if that's okay, fine. Maybe that happened, but it happened freaking once, and this is a story that people give all the time.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
I even doubt the validity of your statement. I'll have to look it up, but that's irrelevant if it's going to happen. That doesn't mean people are not sacrificial lambs that you just weigh. Fine, so I'm going to kill 1 million people and say, no, I did it to save 7 million.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. You know, there's always going to be. You don't want to get into an idea of moral calculus because then you're down the route of the
genocide.
Yeah, the minarchists who want the government and say it's okay to violate 250 million people's property rights because we want to send foreign aid to Africa or something. So yeah.
I don't know any minarchists who advocate foreign aid.
Yeah, no, I don't know any anarchists that.
I don't know any minarchists who advocate foreign aid. They would not be minarchists at that point.
Oh no, quite right. Yeah, I mean, I guess my main point about non-aggression is that if you state that non-aggression is an inviolable right, then anytime you voluntarily violate that right, you're acting in an ethically inconsistent manner, which if you're making an argument in support of non-aggression, it weakens your argument. If you frame non-aggression in a way which is not inviolable, for example, if you frame it in such a way when you say under ordinary circumstances, violation of initiation of force is morally impermissible, but under extraordinary circumstances, it may be morally permissible to initiate force. That's a more common sense. That's a way of framing it that it makes more sense to people when you're arguing. When you're trying to make an argument to convince them.
But I'm not saying there are certain times where you may violate it.
Well, you are. You're saying that if you were starving in the woods and so on, that you would break into the cabin. So that's an initiation of force, and you're saying that you would do it, and as would pretty much anybody. So there are circumstances in which you would you initiate force. You're not going to do something.
The non-aggression principle is justified. If the fact that I have to make reparations means that I understand that the non-aggression principle cannot be violated. If it's okay to violate the non-aggression principle, another way of saying that is there are no penalties for doing so. Right? If it's okay to wear green, there are no penalties for wearing green. If there are penalties for wearing green, even if I say there are certain times when it's okay to wear green, as long as there's still penalties in every scenario where you wear green, I'm saying it's not okay to wear green. See what I'm saying? So the fact that you are it's okay to punish someone for violating the non-aggression principle, even in a situation of the cabins in the woods, and I would say it is, that means it's never okay to violate the non-aggression principle because you're not getting away with it.
Okay, but do you not think that if you're going to voluntarily violate a principle based on your circumstances, that it would suggest that you're being ethically inconsistent if you view non-aggression as an inviolable right? If you're not acting in accordance with your ethics, then doesn't that weaken the proposition of your ethics?
I am acting in accordance with my ethics by paying the guy back.
What if you decide you don't want to pay the guy back?
When I am being a hypocrite.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, you could say that. Okay, well, let's if you extend that out. Imagine you've got a city like
Right? I mean, it's not analogous. Sorry to interrupt, but it's not analogous with the state, because the state doesn't steal your money to give to a poor person and then pay it back. That's not what the state does. They just steal your money to give it to a poor person. There's no, we're going to make reparations. So it's not analogous. I'm saying we have to make reparations to the guy in the cabin in the woods. The state says we're just going to steal your money.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree. But I don't think you can. I think it's very difficult to make the argument that non-aggression is both inviolable and something which you would voluntarily violate. I think those are two contradictory assertions. You see what I'm saying? If you view non-aggression as an inviolable right, it creates a moral imperative that you will not violate that right under any circumstance. And if it isn't an inviolable, if you view it as an inviolable right, but then you're also voluntarily violating that right when the need arises, then you're not acting in an ethically consistent manner. Those two propositions aren't compatible. But if you phrase non-aggression in a way that says initiation of force is impermissible under ordinary circumstances, but may be permissible under extraordinary.
No, but that's still a bad. If you say it's permissible, that means if I'm allowed to do something, there can't be a punishment for me doing it. Otherwise, that means I'm not really allowed to do it. So if there's a punishment for me stealing food, even in the cabins of the woods, that makes it not permissible, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly.
What's the difference between stealing food in the cabins in the woods and having to repay the guy, and just stealing and having to repay the guy? In both scenarios, I still have to make reparations.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Right? No one's going to be able to hold your hand 24 hours a day and ensure that you don't violate the non-aggression principle. And if someone were to do that, then they're violating the non-aggression principle by holding your hands all day when you don't want them to.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's still a rights violation, and you would still be, but there are different kinds of sort of different models of criminal justice. There's retributive criminal justice where you have some sort of punishment, and there is sort of restorative justice where you're saying, okay, I stole, I don't know, some food and some water and broke your door on your cabin, so if I'm going to make reparations, I'm going to, I don't know, pay you twice the cost of the door and twice the cost of the food and the stuff that I took. So that would be an example of restorative justice where you're making the victim of your aggression whole. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it's ethically possible to make an argument where you're saying it's morally impermissible to violate the right, but under certain circumstances I'm still going to violate it anyway. If your ethics is going to apply...
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's always wrong to violate the non-aggression principle, even if you're starving in the cabins of the woods. But you may choose to not always follow moral laws, and if you so choose to follow not moral laws, there are consequences that arise. So I'm not saying it's okay to steal someone's food if you're starving. I'm saying I may break it because my life is more important to me than a guy's freaking apple, and I'm willing to pay the consequences. I'm not saying it's okay for me to do that. Otherwise, I would say if it's okay for me to do something, it's wrong to give me a punishment for something it's okay to do, right? So that's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying there are choices where respecting people's rights are not in my rational self-interest, and it's more in my rational self-interest to violate people's rights and take the consequences that comes from that scenario. And I'd rather be punished for stealing someone's food than starve to death.
Yes. Okay. No, I take your point, but I still think it weakens the proposition of non-aggression if you're.
I'm not saying it's not inviolable. It's always inviolable.
It's always inviolable.
Even in the cabins of the woods, you don't have a right to steal someone's food. The fact that I might do something doesn't mean it's okay. I might act in ways that are wrong.
Do you think it weakens non-aggression as a principle if it cannot be applied consistently?
It can be applied consistently. The principle is consistent. My behavior may be inconsistent. See? Okay.
But look,
there may be certain people who will say, murder is wrong, but in order to save my child's life, I would murder a stranger because my child is more important to me than a stranger. That doesn't mean murder becomes right. It simply means a person decides to act inconsistently. So the person is inconsistent, not the moral principle.
yes, no, I take your point, but if ethics are to mean anything, they're something which govern behavior. That ethics are a framework for deciding what you should do in a particular circumstance. Now, I don't think anybody would say that you should starve if you're in the woods. So
Right.
I don't think you can say that ethically that there is no. You see what I'm saying? If ethically you shouldn't break into the cabin, then ethically you should die. And I think
I don't
that's
think ethics are about what you should do. I think ethics are about what are the when is it okay to use violence, and what are the punishments if you violate a moral principle. So I don't think ethics isn't a question of what you should do. You shouldn't commit adultery, but I think it would be inappropriate to use violence to stop someone from committing adultery.
yeah. I mean, I guess that's sort of the difference between sort of morality and ethics collide a little bit. In to commit adultery is not a violation of non-aggression, so it's not something that's going to it's not going to interest much in the way of libertarian thought. Although it seems to interest Stefan Molyneux quite a bit, which is interesting. Yeah, okay. I mean, I've always viewed ethics as a guide to what you should do in any particular circumstance. So, for something to be ethically consistent, it must be a principle which stands up to any scenario, which is why I guess I always have the problems with non-aggression. Not because I think you should be able to initiate aggression, just because I think it's framed incorrectly.
What moral principle possibly fits that guideline? What moral principle do you know that you can never think of a possible scenario where you may have to break it?
Well, because I think it's just I think non-aggression is right, but I think it's just framed incorrectly. If you frame it such that yeah, like I said earlier, if you frame it such that under ordinary circumstances the initiation of force is not permissible, but under extraordinary circumstances it may be permissible.
I don't think it's a good way of framing it either. I think a better way of framing it is the non-aggression principle is wrong. You should, and if you ever violate it, you will be punished. There are certain circumstances where you may feel inclined to violate the non-aggression principle, and I may even agree that under those circumstances it is in your self-interest to violate it. But if you choose to violate it, you still owe reparations, and you still get punished for the food that you stole. How's that? Instead,
yeah, but
permissible. If you get punished, then it's not permissible. It can't be. If you're allowed to do something, there can be no punishment ever for doing it. Otherwise, what makes it permissible then?
Yes, I mean that's kind of. But I think punishment is probably the confusing word here, because making reparations in terms of giving somebody financial compensation, for example, is different to being, I don't know, locked in a cage for a year. So
I don't think anyone should be locked in a cage for a year for stealing an apple, even under ordinary circumstances.
No, sure. I'm just making the point. So you have punishment and you have reparations. You have punishment, which is some toll exacted on a person to offer some sort of punishment, whether it's removal of their freedom or banishment or whatever it is, and then you have reparations. So if I steal your stereo system, for example, and I'm taken to court, as reparations, I may be required to pay you 2 or 3 times the cost of the stereo to compensate you for its loss, and so on. So that's reparations. But punishment-wise, if I refuse to pay, if I'm unable to pay, if I'm unable to make any reparations whatsoever, I simply say, it's my stereo, I don't care what he says. So that's when punishment comes in, isn't it? So you can have. So I agree that I don't think you should ever be punished for doing the right thing, but
punished how? If you don't want to pay the guy back and you're forced to you, that's punishment.
Well, if I steal your stereo, I sell it to buy, I don't know, whatever it is that people buy when they steal stereos, and then you discover it. I'm arrested, taken to court, and the judge or the arbiter or whoever it is that's overseeing the proceedings, he says, okay, well, you have to pay Daniel 3 times the cost of the stereo. and I say, I don't have any money, I'm not interested in paying him, the guy's an asshole, you know, and I say, I'm not doing it. So that can't be the end of the conversation, otherwise you've got a very strange dispute resolution system going on there.
I would agree.
Yeah, so, I mean, punishment is always going to be there as a...
but punishment would still be there in the cabin of the woods. If I say, I don't want to pay the guy back in the cabins of the woods because the guy in the cabins of the woods, you know, I think is mean for not just letting me eat his food when I'm starving, then the court shouldn't just say, okay, fine, you don't have to pay him back. No, you have to pay him back, whether you want to or not.
Okay, but what's the court going to do if you point blank refuse? And you know,
if you refuse, the same thing that happens if you refuse in any other circumstance. You become an outlaw, and when you're victimized, no one's going to come and recognize and defend you because you don't agree to stand by third-party arbitration.
Okay, I mean, in the case of an apple, that's you know, that's neither here nor there, is it? But you know, if you scale that up and you have a more serious crime being committed because somebody was in need, for example, you know, when does that tipping point become unsustainable?
Why does my needs overweigh your needs? Why is my need for an apple overweigh your need for the apple? I don't think people have a right to property based on need. They have a property based on it's their property, not based on need, right? I don't think there are many people who say, well, no one needs $1 billion, but that doesn't mean it's okay to steal it just because no one needs it, or just because there are poor people who need it more. It's not their money, and you have to respect their property. It's not based on need.
No, no, I absolutely agree. But there are scenarios where you could be compelled to commit more serious crimes based on need. Do you think that it becomes more difficult to be ethically consistent in those situations?
Like what?
Oh, I don't know. You're the lifeboat scenario. You know, the minarchists love their lifeboat scenarios. You know, you're in a lifeboat, the lifeboat's sinking, and you require everybody in the lifeboat to.
If one person owns the lifeboat, then the owner of the lifeboat gets to decide who he wants to save.
No, I mean the lifeboat's sinking, so you're on board, and it requires everyone to bail the water out of the boat. But there's a guy there he just says, you know what, I'm not bailing out this boat. So you take out your gun, you point your gun at him, and say, you know, bail out the boat, or I'm going to shoot.
Depends whose boat it is. If it's the owners of the boat, he doesn't have to jump. And if it's just some guy who's not, then he needs permission from the owner. The owner of the boat decides who should get off his lifeboat.
Yeah, but I would say it's not about, you know, you're on a lifeboat with some other passengers. The owner's not there. The boat's sunk, and the boat's sinking. There's a hole in the boat, and it requires everyone to bail the water out of the boat. So one guy decides he's not bailing the water. So you point your gun. Yeah, and then so you point your gun at him and you say, bail out the water, or I'm going to shoot you. You know, is that a permissible?
Well, why would I say that then?
Well, because if he doesn't, the boat's going to sink.
But he's the only one in it.
No, there's other passengers in there. So everyone else is bailing out of the water, but this guy...
What do you mean? If everyone else is bailing out of the water, that means only he's in the ship.
No, the lifeboat's sinking, not the ship.
The lifeboat is sinking.
Yeah, so your ship's gone down, you've gone into the life raft, and your life raft is sinking. Yeah, that's the life raft scenario.
So the ship is sinking and the life raft is sinking? These are very unrealistic scenarios. And then there's a flying pig that comes and takes someone and eats them. I mean... And
you're the owner of the pig. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really sure I understand the scenario to give a response.
Yeah, it's just a case where you know, if you require somebody to do something because your life is in danger if they don't, or some other people's lives are in danger if they don't. You know, can you threaten or use force against them to compel them to do something, and so on? And if you,
it depends. If they are the cause of it, then they are threatening you. But if they are not the cause of it, then I would say no.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. No, that's good. Okay, no, I was just keen to sort of prod and poke you, because it's interesting, because listening to different anarchists, they have different takes. For example, your take on non-aggression is different to Walter Block's case. He seems a lot more. I like Walter, nice guy, but he has a much more absolutist approach to non-aggression.
What do you mean? Mine's pretty absolute. You could never commit aggression under any circumstances. Now, you may commit aggression under circumstances. I can't control what you do, but there are penalties that arise when you do so. That's pretty absolute. I'm not saying in the cabin in the woods you can't commit acts of aggression. I'm absolute.
But when you have a disconnect between what your ethical absolutes are and what your actions are,
nope. That has nothing to do with the problems of ethics, right? Look,
well, I think ethics is
murder is wrong. Would you agree?
Yes.
If you decide to murder someone, does murder become right?
No.
So your actions are completely irrelevant to whether murder is right or wrong.
Yes, but if I believe that murder is wrong, but then I still go around murdering people, I'm being ethically inconsistent.
Yes, you are. But but you're talking about the way we originally started this conversation is the non-aggression principle is inconsistent because there are people who are inconsistent. And I'm saying, no, that makes the people inconsistent, not the principle.
If there are scenarios where no reasonable person can act ethically, then that, to me, points to a problem with the ethics.
Well, where in what situation? In the cabin in the woods situation?
Yeah.
I mean, there may be some people who are saying, I'm just gonna, eat grass instead because I'm not gonna break into his home, and I'm gonna, piss and drink it to live. Now, it's rare. I don't know how many people are willing to do that, but that may be, possible. Right? I mean, look, we have this great thing called cell phones, and you can pretty much just type an address and look it up. So nowadays, when you're lost, you could probably, you're in the woods and you type the guy's address on the door, and you find out who his name is, and you call the guy up and you say, hey, I'm outside, can I steal your food? And I'll pay it back later.
Now you're fighting the hypothetical. A bear's eating your phone. Yeah.
A bear is eating my phone? Fine. Well, I have two phones. Look. That was easy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Or I kill the bear and I get it out of its stomach. I don't know. And then I eat the bear. I don't even have to eat his food.
Yeah, okay. Yes. No, but I think, to me, that there should always be a connection between your ethics and your actions. Otherwise,
yes.
And I think if you can't apply an ethical standard consistently, then
you can. The non-aggression principle is not about. It's after the fact. It's, do you get punished for violating people's rights? Right? And so the fact that you get punished for violating someone's rights, even if you think it's justifiable to do so. And even if it's unanimously agreed that it's justifiable to do so, I don't think there's anything inconsistent with that, right?
No. So I don't think I can't see a scenario where saying that, because punishment comes after the event. Punishment is something further down the road. Mm-hmm. So leave aside punishment for a second. Is it, it's just a case of what is morally permissible. Ethics, should guide, what we do. And if it doesn't guide what we do, then I don't think it works as an ethical system.
Fine. Then how's this for a compromise? The non-aggression principle. If you violate the non-aggression principle, you owe compensation. There are certain times where you might feel it's in your interest to violate the non-aggression principle. And if you choose to do so, you have to weigh the consequences. So for me...
Consequences come after, though. You still have to tackle the question of what is morally permissible and what is morally impermissible.
Fine. I think it's morally... I'm not even going to say it's morally permissible to break into a guy's cabin and eat its food. I'm only going to say I would probably do so because I care more about preserving my own life than his fucking apple. I'm a selfish prick, and I care more about my life than his apple, and I'm willing to take the consequences from doing so. I should be punished, but it is in my self-interest to break into his home. But I'm not saying you should do it. If a person is saying, I'm never going to break into someone's cabin, I say, okay, this is a more moral guy than me, and that's pretty good, and, you know, I'm not going to criticize that.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's an interesting view. I like that. You know, one day I'm going to be lost in the woods, and this cabin's going to be here, you realize. I'm probably going to die on the porch worrying about what I should do.
I take the apple and then pay the guy back.
Yeah. Knowing my luck, the guy would be in and he'd probably shoot me. I think that would be what would happen in my scenario, I think. It'll be Jan Helfeld in the cabin, I think. That's what it'll be.
Well, or you can, if you really want to have fun with this debate, you can say, look, you could say, look, since everyone pretty much agrees it's okay to take someone's food if you're starving to death, then the guy who owns the cabin probably feels it's okay to take someone's food if you're lost in the woods. Therefore, he probably consents to me eating his food. That's a bit of a stretch, but you can do if that'll make you feel better. You can sort of play that game.
Yes, I mean, I just think it becomes quite difficult if you go down that route. You know, because he would have the right to stop you from taking his food, wouldn't he?
Huh?
The guy who owned the cabin, if he discovers
if you're starving to death and you go into someone's home and are about to take someone's food, and the guy has a gun and he goes, leave. And if you take my food, I'll shoot you. And you say, I'm starving, I don't care what you say, and he kills you, it's not murder. We understand you're starving, but that doesn't give you a right to break into someone's home. And if you do, a person has every right to say, get out of my house.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty sensible. It's not my problem, right? It's
not my problem. Why did you decide to get lost in the woods? Why did you, not my fault,
No,
I know who you are.
Yeah, no, I agree pretty much with that. I think our points of disagreement are on whether acceptance of punishment is governs whether you can or cannot do something, or whether you should and should not do something. Whether punishment should enter in. What if the punishment was the death penalty? For stealing an apple.
It wouldn't be, because that's excessive. I don't think that theft is never the death penalty is never for theft. I would argue in any just society.
No, I completely agree. But it just becomes, to me, that just becomes a calculus then of, here is the crime, here is the punishment, is it worth it? It becomes a trade-off then, right? It becomes a calculus of action and consequence rather than of morality and ethics, which I think that's probably.
No, because I'm saying you owe the guy.
Yes, but it's still you agree it's still a rights violation. So then rights violations don't become something that you can't do. They become something you can do if you feel like you can.
I may choose to violate someone's rights because I believe that it is in self-interest to do so, and so I have to weigh. Well, if I don't steal the guy's apple, I die, and if I steal his apple, yes, it's violating his rights, but the penalty will be reimbursing him for 3 apples. And I'm willing to pay that penalty than the penalty of starvation. So I'm just going to take his apple. And you weigh that, and you do that. And that's, I think, the rational choice.
No, I agree. It is the rational choice. But I just think that as far as ethics go, it becomes, you've almost displaced ethical considerations with a consideration of simply, here is a rights violation that I may want to commit. What is the cost-benefit analysis? It's almost, to me, it almost seems like.
I would say that's okay in any situation. If you really want to have sex with a girl, I'm going to be offensive now. If you really want to have sex with a girl, maybe it's worth it for you to go in jail for 20 years and rape her. So you have to weigh that. Now, I'm not saying that's justified, but maybe it's in your self-interest. I've never met a girl that's beautiful. It's worth it to go to jail for 20 years to rape her. And so you have to weigh that. I wouldn't, personally. But maybe there are people who say, I'm just going to rape the person because I'd rather rape and not take the consequence that comes from that. I think you can do a cost-benefit analysis in any situation. I don't think that's crazy.
No, I think it's a way of organizing. It's just that to me that consideration is secondary to ethical considerations. If everything becomes a cost-benefit analysis, then if you are particularly wealthy, you can violate people's rights all day long, knowing that you can simply pay them off, and there becomes nothing. It seems to be, ethics should apply to everybody, whether it's a pauper in the street or whether it's some multi-billionaire. And I don't know. It just seems to me that it's a bit disconnected. It moves the focus from the ethical considerations to the cost-benefit analysis. Do you agree?
All right.
Which I think, to me, seems the wrong. I guess I'm struggling to get my head around that a little bit, because I'm still quite, I'm still fleshing out my ideas and my beliefs around non-aggression and anarchism. So I've been sort of treading the anarchist path for many years, but I'm sort of stumbling along and taking on board new arguments as I go. So when I find arguments that I find appealing, I like to prod them a little bit and see whether they're consistent and so on. But for me, I think most of us become anarchists because we want a more just society. We want to live in a society that is better, that is freer, that is more just than the society in which we live. And to me, I think non-aggression appeals to people because of its strength as an ethical consideration. And I think if you displace that with simple cost-benefit analysis, I don't know. To me, it seems a little bit more jaded and a little bit more. I don't know what the word is. A little bit more cynical, perhaps. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But it's interesting to hear the defence there. But I hadn't focused too much on the cost-benefit side of things before. That's pretty interesting. Have you got anything else you want to ask me, or should we wrap up? No. Okay. Well, I found that pretty interesting. I'm glad you agreed to do it. That was pretty good.
Yeah. Thank you. It's fun. Cool. Well, good. I hope it helped. Great having you on. Nice.
It's a pleasure.
45 minutes. Yeah. Cool. Anyway, I guess we're done. Thank
okay.
you.
Cheers, Dan.